been waiting for has now finally arrived.
From knockouts to tap-outs.
It's all over!
Inside the octagon and beyond.
Is this not real now? Are we pretending?
We're rich, baby. Break out the red panties.
This is the MMA Report with John Pollock.
Unbelievable! Here we go!
It's the MMA Report. I'm your host, John Pollock, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of the program. It's going to be a busy one today. We have no less than 3 guests that will be joining us, including UFC middleweight champion Michael Bisping, who is featured in the new XXX film, The Return of Xander Cage. He plays the role of Hawk. It's out in theaters Friday. He's going to join us for an update on his health, as well as what went down recently with Tyron Woodley, if there was any serious discussion about that fight, and this movie that he's in, which you will recall was the movie he was filming in Toronto when he got the call on 2 weeks' notice to replace Chris Weidman and fight Luke Rockhold at UFC 199, and then pulled off what was a very big upset to many people and becoming middleweight champion. We'll chat with Mr. Bisping about that, and we will also be joined by Brennan Ward, who is in action this Saturday night on a loaded Bellator 170 card, taking on Paul Daley. It's happening in Inglewood, California, on Spike TV Saturday night, headlined by Chael Sonnen and Tito Ortiz. It will be Ortiz's retirement fight, and unlike the Forrest Griffin fight at UFC 148 in 2012, I think everybody believes this is the final fight of Tito Ortiz's career. We're going to chat about the career and interesting legacy that Tito Ortiz holds within the sport. We'll chat about that with Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer newsletter and contributor at MMAfighting.com. But let us go through a few news and notes from the past week. We have a new fight for the UFC 208 card happening in Brooklyn, New York on February the 11th as Anderson Silva will be fighting Derek Brunson. This was a fight that was announced late on Friday after our show had come out by UFC President Dana White, with Anderson Silva's first fight since the quick notice fight against Daniel Cormier last July at UFC 200. That was a non-title fight at light heavyweight. So first middleweight fight for the former champion Anderson Silva since pretty much a year ago, by the time this fight occurs, from the Michael Bisping fight in February of last year in England. He's taking on Derek Brunson, who was on a hell of a run up until his fight with Robert Whittaker. This is a interesting fight that they have put together. Rashad Evans was on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani this week, speaking about the fact that that was a fight he was pushing for Rashad Evans to fight Anderson Silva, but did not end up coming to pass, obviously, and therefore Derek Brunson now in that spot. Certainly a dangerous opponent for Anderson Silva, who there are numerous questions about. We haven't seen him at middleweight. I think everybody, rightly so, should kind of write off the Daniel Cormier fight because, I mean, Anderson Silva took that fight on such short notice. It was hardly indicative of what we can expect from Anderson Silva. Granted, this fight, it's not as though he's getting a full training camp for this. This card is in 3 weeks' time on February the 11th. That is quickly approaching us, the Brooklyn card. Derek Brunson, I think with Robert Whittaker, he just kind of got out of control and just was wild in that particular fight. I think a more harnessed Derek Brunson, certainly that was a winnable fight for him and had many opportunities and kind of left himself open, and it was just a firefight between those two, with Robert Whittaker landing the key blow and finishing Derek Brunson in that wild fight, if you missed it, in Australia last November. So Derek Brunson, I'm curious what the line will be on this particular fight, because I feel Derek Brunson is a very dangerous opponent for Anderson Silva, and it's going to be a good test to see what we can expect from Anderson Silva. This is someone who narrowly lost to Michael Bisping a year ago, and now Michael Bisping is your middleweight champion. We're going to get into this later with Michael Bisping, but he is set to have knee surgery, and that was exclusive from our interview, that he has a slightly torn meniscus. He's going to have surgery in a couple of weeks, and is hoping to fight around May of this year. So we will hear more from Bisping later on in this show with that entire interview. But yet another champion that is on the shelf for now, and when I sent this message out, the amount of interim title jokes I received, it was definitely confirmation of how laughable some of these interim titles have become in mixed martial arts, in specific to the UFC, who will create their latest one in March with an interim lightweight title for Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. The Halifax card in February, that's a Sunday night card, was to be headlined by Junior Dos Santos and Stefan Struve in a rematch from way back in February of 2009. And that was Stefan Struve's UFC debut. So it was not the most requested rematch in heavyweight history, but nonetheless, Stefan Struve suffered a torn labrum, and he is out, requires surgery. And the problem is so many of the heavyweights are booked. The only options are Fabricio Verdum, who I spoke with his management over the past week, and they informed me Verdum is only interested in fighting for the title. And fighting on a Halifax fight night card against Junior Dos Santos, probably not likely. Then the other option is Ben Rothwell, and that fight just happened last April. I don't think there's any demand to see Junior Dos Santos and Ben Rothwell so soon after the last fight. And outside of that, every top heavyweight is booked at the moment. I mean, Josh Barnett just recently got flagged by USADA, so he is not an option. There aren't a whole lot at heavyweight. So Junior Dos Santos has not officially been removed from that card, but Arrow Hawani reported that Johny Hendricks and Hector Lombard now looks to be the new main event, or at least has been added to the Halifax card, not specifically listed as the main event yet. That could still be, if they find a slot for Junior Dos Santos' opponent, you would imagine that would stay in the main event status. But Johny Hendricks moving up to 185 pounds after two consecutive weight misses. He will take on Hector Lombard, who as well has lost his last two fights. That is now currently scheduled for Halifax. Very important fight for both individuals. I feel that Johny Hendricks, he has had such a rough year that moving up in weight, probably not the worst idea for Hendricks at this point, because his weight has been a problem with the Kelvin Gastelum fight in July, missing weight, and then most recently missing weight again against Neil Magny just a couple of weeks back to close off the year at UFC 207. So it's an important fight. For Johny Hendricks, I would have liked to have seen him get a lot more time to prepare for a fight than simply a month's notice. He's got 4 weeks to get ready for his first middleweight fight, having lost his last 3 and 4 of his last 5. This is must-win time for Johny Hendricks, even in this new era of the UFC where it takes a lot more than just a couple losses before you're cut. For Johny Hendricks, this is someone that, I mean, it's been a massive fall from grace since the days of him holding the welterweight title, which was only 3 years ago. Also in the news from this past week, Tim Kennedy has announced his retirement. This follows his loss to Kelvin Gastelum back in December in Toronto at the Air Canada Centre, a fight that, I mean, Kennedy was competitive in the first round, but Kelvin Gastelum was certainly the superior fighter that night, and you saw that momentum continue for Kelvin Gastelum throughout that fight. For Tim Kennedy, it had been a long time since we had last seen him. He was off for over 2 years in between the Yoel Romero and Gastelum fights, someone that has been competing since 2001, and you saw him come up through various organizations, fought in the IFL, later in Strikeforce, and then coming to the UFC in 2013. He retires with a record of 18-6, and certainly feels like he will have a major presence in mixed martial arts through his affiliation with the Mixed Martial Arts Athletes Association. This is one of the brightest individuals in the sport for mixed martial arts, and as much critiquing of the Mixed Martial Arts Athletes Association that has come with the affiliation to Bjorn Rebney, I think it's been equal praise because of the likes of a Tim Kennedy being involved and somebody speaking on behalf of the fighters. And to me, if that Athletes Association is going to take those next steps, Tim Kennedy is a very important piece of that puzzle. So Tim Kennedy retiring after a 15-year professional career. Stipe Miocic and Tyron Woodley, both champions that do not appear to be very happy with the organization at this point for different reasons. Stipe Miocic was on the MMA Hour this past Monday, And this is a guy that is notoriously one of the toughest interviews in mixed martial arts. You have heard him on this show. You've heard him on many shows. This is not a man of many words, at times pulling teeth with this guy. So it was quite the revelation to hear him be so outspoken about his current contract situation. What necessitated this change in attitude for Miocic was finding out after UFC 203 that Alistair Overeem made more money for that fight, was at least his purse was larger, with $800,000 for Overeem compared to $600,000 for Miocic. Now, I would also presume that Miocic had a cut of the pay-per-view, which was UFC 203, that featured an above-average figure because of CM Punk's involvement for his fight with Mickey Gall. And therefore, what Stipe Miocic's take-home pay all told was, we don't know that exact figure. Now, Stipe Miocic was told, listen, that's the contract you signed, but Miocic definitely feels disrespected by all of this. He is down to fight whoever, he stated many times in this interview, but he is not happy. He thought that it was a slap in the face, that Overeem was paid more, and he was the reason that the Quicken Loans Arena was full that night, which I was there that night, and believe me, Stipe Miocic was a megastar to these people. And that finish, I was in the back during that fight, and that roar when Stipe Miocic finished Overeem was one of the loudest I have ever heard. And I was not actually in the actual portion, the arena portion. That was just in the back hearing that. It was an incredible reaction to that, and I feel Stipe Miocic fighting in Cleveland is a surefire formula for success from a live gate perspective. Stipe Miocic has not crossed that threshold at this moment to become a big pay-per-view draw on his own, but not all champions are going to be able to be those 500,000 buy fighters. There are very few that can crack that level. But Stipe Miocic paired with another attraction, paired with another title fight in Cleveland. In particular, it's been thrown out numerous times of him and Cody Garbrandt in individual fights at a future Cleveland card would seem to make a whole lot of sense. But Miocic in this interview with Ariel Helwani indicated that he's looking at probably fighting in May, and that would probably be a Las Vegas card for their annual Memorial Day show, which they did not do last year. Last year they actually went to Brazil in May for their 198 pay-per-view. But we'll see. Miocic classified it as a mess right now when discussing his contract situation. Now, Tyron Woodley, it's not his contract that is the problem. He is signed on to fight Stephen Thompson in a rematch from their UFC 205 fight, and that will happen on March the 4th at UFC 209 in Las Vegas. But he was on ESPN doing the whole car wash with Stephen Thompson. And I find these very awkward, where you have to have both guys together. And the peak of this was the two of them doing one of their many sit-down interviews together on ESPN, and Tyron Woodley was very outspoken, stating of all UFC champions ever, he is the worst treated of all of them, and believes that race plays a factor in this and going into this. And it's very difficult to assess a situation like this when you are not Tyron Woodley. And I have no doubt that as a black man in mixed martial arts in this sport on a day-to-day basis, I am sure this man receives tons of racial comments on Twitter, hateful comments. I have no doubt about that. I think similar about females in this sport who I cannot even fathom what they must deal with in contrast to men in the sport. And in particular, in Tyron Woodley's case, the difference between criticism that is, from fans online who have zero filter and some with zero respect. And I don't want to paintbrush everybody out there, but it certainly exists. Now, it's very different to then characterize the UFC and their choice of promotion as being essentially directed by race. I don't believe that to be the case. Are they tapping into that market? Are they attracting a black audience and presenting their champions to this audience in a way that is working? That is really something that I myself, as a white man, cannot truly speak to. I would be very curious in other opinions. He brought up Demetrius Johnson, stating that this is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and yet look at his numbers and his drawing power. I don't believe that Demetrius Johnson and his drawing power has anything to do with race. I don't know what it has to do with. Demetrius Johnson has not been able to be a heavily successful drawing champion. That's just a fact because we get these numbers. We see what the performance is. Demetrius Johnson has done some very healthy television numbers, but pay-per-view, he has not. But that can be the case for numerous champions. With all the promotion Cody Garbrandt received going into UFC 207, him headlining a pay-per-view tomorrow with TJ Dillashaw, that's not going to do gangbuster numbers either. There are select few that are major pay-per-view draws in this sport. And I feel once you have that ability to be a significant draw, I really do not believe that race is a contributing factor. It wasn't when Quinton Jackson came and in his first pay-per-view against Chuck Liddell did a gigantic number, and then following that on free television did a massive number on Spike TV against Dan Henderson. And believe me, Quinton Jackson, that was not just simply on the shoulders of Chuck Liddell in May of 2007, and that was, to me, Quinton Jackson was the significant draw against Dan Henderson on free television. Now, granted, that was also a big championship fight. It was marketed as the UFC light heavyweight champion against the lineal pride champion in Dan Henderson. But this is certainly a topic that you can dissect from many different angles. I will say, when there is one particular guy that I find to be the most engaging speaker in mixed martial arts, Tyron Woodley may be at the top of that list. I feel this is somebody who has just a complete, honest assessment of himself, his placement, and this is one of the most articulate and engaging interviews in the sport, bar none. And I feel Tyron Woodley is somebody that can be going into many different avenues, representing the UFC as their welterweight champion. And I feel there's definitely something to what he says about being marketed in different ways. This guy, his life story is that of a movie. It's incredible what this man has achieved and all the different areas he is in, from acting to his upbringing that he has been very open about in terms of growing up in a 4-bedroom house, as he described, with a family of 14, never doing performance-enhancing drugs, becoming a champion in the way in which he did against Robbie Lawler, one of the great welterweights of all time. And prior to that, a middleweight. So Tyron Woodley, this is going to be a very interesting next month because UFC 209 is going to be marketed around Tyron Woodley, Stephen Thompson, Tony Ferguson, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. It feels like that next level of stars who are going to be given a big stage on a big Las Vegas pay-per-view, and these are all 4 very engaging personalities in completely different ways from one another. And you take those 4 into the mix, how will this show do on pay-per-view? It's one of the more interesting numbers, I feel, as we get closer to that Las Vegas card, March the 4th. And another news item as well, before we take the break, it was reported by Newsday on Thursday that UFC 210, which was just announced this past weekend for Buffalo, New York on Saturday, April 8th. It has its first fight, and it will be a middleweight bout involving former champion Chris Weidman and Gegard Mousasi. Very interesting fight at 185 pounds. I thought that after Weidman's most recent loss to Yoel Romero, it would open the door for him to go up to 205 pounds. He was at least tabling the idea, but at least one more fight at 185 pounds, and you beat Gegard Mousasi, you're kind of right into the mix of things to get back into the title hunt. But light heavyweight, as I've said ad nauseum, it's wide open when you get outside of Daniel Cormier, Anthony Johnson, and John Jones. It would seem with so many of those middleweights in that top 10 picture that 205 would be an avenue worth exploring. But for Weidman, it will be Gegard Mousasi he draws next on April the 8th on pay-per-view. All right, we are going to take a timeout. When we come back, we are going to be joined by Dave Meltzer. We're going to go over the numbers that are in from this past Sunday's FS1 card, which was headlined by Yair Rodriguez defeating BJ Penn and got some unexpected gigantic competition from the NFL that night. And we'll also discuss the career and legacy of Tito Ortiz, who will have his final fight this Saturday night at Bellator 170 against Chael Sonnen. And still to come, you're going to hear from Brennan Ward, who is also on that Bellator card, and Michael Bisping, the UFC middleweight champion, is here on the MMA Report as we continue.
Well, here we need to set the record straight because Tito's been dodging Chuck for a long time, and it had nothing to do with the movie commitment, so I don't know where he gets that.
All right, what did it have? I think that's something you might have made up there, buddy, or you're listening to Dana a little too much, because last time I looked on my waist, I still got the belt right here.
Yeah, I got a belt too, bud. And you're the one that made the belt a joke in the first place by dodging Chuck for so long. You remember this guy right here?
Yep, exactly. You guys are contenders. You guys are staying contenders, buddy, because I'm the champ, and I'll just keep being the champion.
Step up and fight him.
Oh, well, hey, I'm here right now, and you're going to get the next beating. That's all that's going to matter.
Now, come Friday night, we'll settle this dispute once and for all. I take you down and pound a hole in your head.
But 2 fists will be nice and that TNT and dynamite's going to explode on your face, buddy.
Let these dogs out. I can't always call them back.
That's good.
All right, Tito, actually, you're here to kind of extend an olive branch, if you will. You brought something for Randy?
Yes, actually, I did bring something for Randy. I mean, I really do care about Randy. I mean, it's a factor. I mean, in my mind, Randy is a true champion. At heavyweight he was, but now he's coming to my weight. But I got a little trick for him, and of course a little gift. For after the fight's over, make sure he can walk okay. I got a cane for him. That way, so he can come over to the Palms to my after party and make sure that he can walk around. So I got a cane for him to walk around. So.
Wow.
Well, thanks, Tito, but I think you better hang on to that because I think you're going to need it Friday night to get out of the octagon.
Yeah, we'll see about that there, old man.
Okay.
We are back here on the MMA Report, and it's a pleasure to be joined by this man who you can read all of his work at both MMAfighting.com, and, of course, he is the editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter out at WrestlingObserver.com. Dave Meltzer is with us. Dave, how are you doing today?
Really good. How are you, John?
I'm doing very good. Wanted to chat with you about a number of topics. First off, looking back at this past Sunday, because this was the third consecutive year that the UFC attempted this experiment following an NFL playoff game and got the curveball on Saturday that they ended up getting head-to-head competition. So I want to get your thoughts on the final number, which worked out to be 1,090,000 viewers. Given their unexpected competition, how did you view this number on Sunday?
I got to view it as good. I mean, the last 2 years did well over 2 million viewers. Mm-hmm. But they also had far, far stronger shows. I mean, even with no football game, I don't think it would have done that. But I do think that that football game did 37 million viewers, and it's the same demo. And if you look at the BJ Penn fight, which was after the game, doing, 1.6 million, I got to think that they probably would have done 1.5 million without that football game. It hurt them a lot. So overall, I would consider it as, going against a big game like that, it's a good number. Especially the prelims doing 824,000 really surprised me because I thought the prelims had no names or anything. So it was a good sign that there's an interest in just basic UFC at a certain level, even against that competition. Because except for BJ Penn, there really wasn't anyone on that show that a casual fan is going to really know.
If you're the NFL, I mean, you have to be looking at this like this was it was a happy accident for them, the fact that there was this out of their control issue that forced this late game in prime time. That, I mean, do you see, looking to next year, is this something the UFC even continues if the NFL makes this decision that these primetime playoff games are going to attract a much bigger audience, obviously dependent on the game as well, rather than an afternoon game where this lead-in may not be the option for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that they have to look at because if you're UFC, it's never a good idea to go against an NFL playoff game. I mean, that's just the absolute worst competition possible for a UFC event. But they did all right with it. I mean, the last time BJ was on TV, which was with Frankie Edgar, who's a much bigger star, I think that the number wasn't that much different. I think that was a summer number, as I recall. But yeah, the UFC thing, being plugged in the afternoon on the NFL game that Fox runs has been a big success. But it bit them this time because they were going against an NFL game. Sure.
How did you find, I mean, watching that main event? I mean, you looked at this on paper, and I can't say you could be stunned by this outcome, but it really was one of those sad performances to watch where you're seeing BJ Penn here being thrown against a guy like Yair Rodriguez, and I just don't know what you can realistically expect with a BJ Penn beyond this fight as long as he's in the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, it's very rare that you see guys turn back time, and BJ looked really bad with Edgar, and that was 2.5 years ago. And I know, there's always that thing, well, now he's at, a real camp, but, with Greg Jackson and everything like that. And that's great for strategy, but Greg Jackson cannot make you faster, and he can't change your athletic ability, and he can't stop you from aging. And, BJ was a guy who got by on more on talent than anything else. And those kind of guys, and especially when you're in a lighter weight class, which is a speed weight division, it's not kind to you when you get older. I mean, the guys who do really well when they're older are usually bigger guys and guys that have a, super hard training mentality. Like a Randy Couture or Dan Henderson that comes from, all those years of high-class Greco-Roman wrestling. Those type of guys, or a heavy hitter like a Mark Hunt who's durable, where the loss of speed doesn't hurt you that much. But when you're talking about a 145, and you saw that speed difference in that fight, I mean, the fight was inevitable. It was what I expected, but it was just really sad to actually watch it play out.
It seems that, if you are so dead set on utilizing a BJ Penn, do you see a mentality shifting for the UFC where Bellator understands that there are name fighters out there that are no longer in the prime of their careers any longer? However, there's an audience for them that if you are going to utilize a BJ Penn, Yair Rodriguez is probably not your destination of making the younger guy if you want to get some longevity out of a BJ Penn, or is that even an option in the UFC looking forward?
It's hard in UFC because UFC doesn't do much in the way of gimmick fights. I mean, I think that the idea of this fight, as it turned out, was, just Yair Rodriguez got seen in a main event capacity and looked fantastic in the fight. And as far as building Yair Rodriguez to people, it was effective. I think people now know who he is, that they kind of did before, but now it's like, wow, he can contend for the championship. And we don't know because we really don't know what level he is by this performance other than he looked great. So I don't fault them for this matchmaking, but if BJ is ever going to fight again, and I hope that he doesn't, you're only, don't do this, don't do a repeat performance. I mean, at that point, put him against somebody who's closer to his age. But really, unfortunately, UFC is not the place for guys like that, and maybe Bellator is a better place where it's kind of gimmick fights. I mean, I suppose if you were to bring back somebody, from BJ's era or something like that and put the fight on, and it would still draw people. So, I mean, you could make an argument for that. But yeah, no more young guys for BJ, I think is probably the best move.
I guess with the double whammy of the UFC having to hit all of these financial marks this year and beyond with the sale and the debt, on top of the fact that they are going to be entering in 2018 into a contract year with Fox, can you see more gimmick ideas that from the UFC that is just going to inflate numbers, such as their Fox specials, and kind of get away from their traditional style of matchmaking that by and large is what you see with the odd aberration?
Yeah, I do think that especially what we saw with like Michelle Waterson and Paige Van Zandt and how that drew, I think that we'll probably get more gimmick matchmaking. But like if it's a BJ Penn or an Anderson Silva, Anderson Silva and Derek Brunson was a weird fight to me. But if you have guys like that, it's probably better to put them against guys of their own era.
Right.
And because that's going to draw best anyway. I mean, Tito Ortiz and Liam McGarry didn't do anything with Bellator. Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner did great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's your lesson right there. People, they'll see grudge matches of that thing, but the idea of seeing the older guys challenge for the championship, when Ortiz went to challenge for the championship, that number to me told a really big story. It was like the people didn't really buy Ortiz, or they didn't buy the championship, or whatever it was. So it's like, yeah, I mean, Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie was well and good and all that, or against Kimbo, but if you put Ken Shamrock against just some normal guy, who would destroy him, I don't think there'd be any interest in that at all.
Now, as we shift on over to Bellator, it is Tito Ortiz's retirement fight this Saturday, which I think everyone expects will be his retirement fight for good this time. As you look back at the significance and importance of Tito Ortiz, I mean, this was somebody that both pre-Ultimate Fighter and post-Ultimate Fighter had an enormous impact on this promotion. And I wanted to go back and from someone that was covering this at the time to put into context how important the first Tito Ortiz Ken Shamrock fight was back in 2002.
Yeah, I mean, Tito was the biggest star they had from when they bought the company in 2001 until, Chuck Liddell pretty much, overtook him and Randy Couture to a degree as well when Randy Couture beat him. But if you take that Shamrock-Ortiz fight out, we very well may not have a UFC, or UFC may have been sold for a lot less money because UFC's pay-per-views were doing terrible. And then they did the Ken Shamrock-Tito Ortiz thing, which was kind of like, almost a desperation play. Ken had been with Pride and everything. And it did such big numbers that it kind of like told the UFC that there is potential in this when we have, and it got a lot of attention too. It's like, if we do have the right mix, this does have potential. And then the key was getting it on television, which took several years to happen. But I do think that if the Shamrock-Ortiz fight at that point bombed on pay-per-view, that the Fertittas would have gotten out. So yes, I think that was a really important fight historically.
It was also, I mean, you can document the three different fights, Dave, and the lessons learned at that time. Like the first fight, there was a bit of an outcry that Chuck Liddell was not getting his title fight in order for that first fight to happen. Then when the second fight occurred, this is going to be so one-sided. And then the third fight that had tons of people up in arms that they were going back to it. And yet, I would argue, Dave, that is the most important feud in UFC history because you take that out.
Without a doubt, it's the most important feud because, and it's the first one, obviously, for the reasons that we discussed. But the third one, which is the one that everyone decried, and really, I mean, if you look at it with today's eyes, it made absolutely no sense because the reality is in that second fight, the big controversy was that Tito knocked Ken out, and then Ken got right up, protested it was an early stoppage. And in those days, people didn't really know what they were watching. And if you watched it, like with today's eyes, it was clear that elbow put Ken out. Mm-hmm. And it was a very justifiable stoppage, and it was like in a minute. So there never should have been a third fight. But the public didn't know that. The public thought it was an early stoppage. And then you had that third fight, and you put it on free television, and the ratings of that third fight, I mean, that changed UFC forever because it was like, oh my God, they were doing, in the 18 to 34 demo, they beat World Series games. I mean, people who were, they did a huge buy rate for that second Shamrock Tito fight. It was huge. It was a record for the company. But in the mentality of the regular sports people and people in the sports business, pay-per-view was a weird thing because it's only boxing and MMA and pro wrestling and real, it's like, most of the sports people didn't really pay attention to it. But when you did a TV rating that big, the, sports media all of a sudden had to go, oh my God, there's something here. The numbers were phenomenal for that, and it blew everyone away. I mean, I remember talking to Dana White the next morning, or the morning that right before the ratings came out publicly, but we actually got that early that morning. We got a preliminary number, and it was like, oh my God, this thing's going to do over a 3 rating. And it blew both of us away. I mean, we thought it would do good, but it did way better than anyone expected, and it really showed that, like, the right UFC fight on free television is, it really showed the value of UFC as a television product, which, yeah, that changed the business, and that led to where we are now.
And was there not a lot of resistance within the company to go to that third fight right after?
I don't know how much within the company. I mean, from the MMA media, it was gigantic.
Yeah.
Just saying it wasn't necessary and it was one-sided, and they were right in both cases. But I don't remember it in the company. I remember that Dana White, so many people were upset at the Vegas show with the stoppage because it was a terrible show because they also had this terrible Andre Arlovsky, Tim Sylvia fight on the same show. So it was like they wanted to do another one, and then Dana kind of thought that, like, putting it on pay-per-view would be kind of a negative thing, and it's like, well, why don't we put it on free TV? And they'd never put a fight of that caliber on free TV before. So it was kind of like, well, we know it'll do ratings, but, what's our ceiling? And then they found out that their ceiling was much higher than anyone knew, and it was from a business standpoint, that third fight was one of the most important fights in history.
So those are some business highs that we're talking about with the UFC, and here we are almost a decade later, and still one of the most baffling ones to me, Dave, is the infamous Spike special with Dana White and Tito Ortiz. And I think that was a real crossroads of Tito Ortiz and his star power. I think this was just a documentary that got put on television out of, it was ego that got this thing on the air the way it did. And I think that definitely had a significant one for Tito Ortiz.
Well, it made Tito Ortiz look like he backed down from a fight from Dana White. I mean, yeah, when I remember that whole thing, the whole idea of the Tito Ortiz Dana White thing was just a terrible idea, because it's like, what could you get? I mean, Dana White did box, Tito wasn't a boxer, but let's just say that Tito beat up Dana White in a boxing match. I mean, he should, but it's like then he's going to be viewed as like kind of a bully, you know what I mean? But if he loses, then it's just like your top guy just got beat up by your owner. I mean, it was just terror. The whole mentality behind it when the whole thing was talked about first and it was about to happen, I was just like, and I think Lorenzo Fertitta thought the same thing. It was just like those two guys made some deal when Tito signed a contract. It's like, well, I'll sign if I get to box Dana. And Dana said, well, okay. And Dana actually started training for it and everything. And it was like, this is a no-win situation. And then at the end, you know, Tito ended up not fighting. And I thought, okay, I remember the week that it happened. And, you know, the Nevada Commission got involved and everything like that. And then, like, I got the phone call, you know, essentially when Tito backed off it was from Keith Kaiser with the commission. And he just goes, you know, Tito didn't show up for weigh-ins and the fight's not happening. He goes, is it postponed? He goes, no, this fight's not going to happen. We've been through, you know, it's like, we're not going to go through this again. So it was like, it was a dead issue. And then when they put the special on it, and I mean, people didn't know the backstory at that point, even though it had been reported that the fight didn't happen. People were watching that show and they all thought it's going to climax with the fight, and then it climaxed the way it did. And yeah, I think it, you know, you don't hurt the drawing power of one of your few draws, and that certainly did.
And as we look ahead to this Saturday, just a quick look, Tito Ortiz and Chael Sonnen. What have you garnered from the promotion for this fight? I mean, certainly they have lofty aspirations for what this fight does on Spike Saturday night. Do you think that they've caught that? Because I don't sense that we're going to be approaching Kimbo numbers here.
I don't either. I don't feel it at all. I mean, it's like I haven't seen anything that leads. I mean, it'll do fine, but I don't feel it even like the Tito Bonner fight, which surprises me because I thought that, you know, Chael being the master promoter, that you would really feel it. And I remember like when I watched the Bellator things and they went back and forth, it was always awkward and not that good. I don't know exactly what it was. It almost seemed like forced or something, but. Whatever it is, yeah, I don't know. When they announced it, I thought, yeah, Chael's going to, you know, talk this thing up. And now that we're almost here, man, I haven't felt it.
And it's also interesting that beyond this fight, what your options are as well with Chael Sonnen that is really going to capture that. Certainly there's the elusive Wanderlei Silva option that is out there and has its own hurdles to clear before that's made. Do you sense what that magic fight is out there that Bellator has? Because Chael Sonnen is a key to their, you know, at least short-term future.
Yeah, well, I mean, in theory, Chael's one of the best promoters that there is at building up a fight. But, you know, I mean, there's a reality of, you know, where he stands. But, I mean, yeah, against Wanderlei, that's the kind of fight people would want to see. And that would be, I think Chael and Wanderlei actually would probably do real well. But the question is getting Wanderlei to fight. Wanderlei hasn't fought in a long, long time, and I don't really believe that Wanderlei wants to fight again. Because if he did, you know, it just things keep happening that lead me to believe that he knows he's done, and he's just, you know, I don't see him with that mentality and with the grudge with Tito going in there with Chael going in there to lose to Chael.
Always great to chat with Dave Meltzer. Once again, you can catch all of his work at WrestlingObserver.com, including the Wrestling Observer newsletter that comes out each and every Thursday morning, and of course at MMAfighting.com. At this time, we are going to hear from Bellator welterweight Brennan Ward, who is coming off an incredible victory over Saad Awad, bouncing back after a quick loss to Evangelista Cyborg Santos last year. Brennan Ward, one of the more exciting fighters on the Bellator roster, has been fighting there since 2012, has seen the regime change, and takes on Paul Daley this coming Saturday night. This is one of the best Bellator main cards, I feel, in years. You have your marquee main event that has all of the attention, but in the lead up to that, if you tune in, lots of great action fights here. Halleck Gracie is returning after years away from the sport to take on Hisaki Kato. You've also got Derek Anderson and Derek Campos and Georgi Karahanyan taking on Emmanuel Sanchez. But if you're looking for sheer action, it may be no larger than the fight that involves Paul Daley and Brennan Ward. So my colleague at Fight Network, Cody Saftic, and I got the opportunity earlier this week to sit down with Brennan Ward and chat about this fight with Paul Daley. Was Paul Daley someone that has been on your radar for a while? Because this is certainly a very deep main card for Bellator, and this is one of the standout fights just from a styles perspective.
Yeah, I mean, not that he's been on my radar, but he is, he's one of the top dogs at that weight, and I'm one of the top dogs at that weight. And I like to think that, he and I are, two of the most exciting dudes at that weight class. So it only makes sense to have me and him fight on a show such as this.
Now, the logical step, as you mentioned, you guys are both super talented and very exciting fighters. On a matchmaking standpoint, it makes a whole lot of sense to match you guys up with each other. But you've also got a very standout wrestling pedigree, wrestling collegiately D2 and D3, as well as a couple good performances at Rumble at the Garden. Do you feel like your wrestling is going to be the advantage in this fight?
I mean, if I want it to be, you know what I'm saying? But ain't no one's trying to watch no one lay on somebody for 15 minutes. They're trying to watch two dudes bang out. And I'm just as confident in my hands as I am with my wrestling. So I'm probably just going to stand and bang and give the fans what they want to see and fucking get into a slugfest.
Now, you've been a long-time Connecticut guy. Is that where you're spending the majority of your training camp for this fight as well?
Yeah, I live in Connecticut, born and raised here. I live very close to Rhode Island, so I do my camp in Connecticut and Rhode Island, yes.
And a lot of fighters always talk about branching out, getting different looks, different perspectives. But there's a group of fighters that also say, you got to stay loyal to your ties. Are you one of those fighters that feels like you can get all the training and all the necessities that you need right at home?
Absolutely, man. I've trained, I've trained all over, but I love where I'm at. I'm very comfortable with my team that I have here, and that's what I do. Look, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, man. I'm doing fine.
How quickly did this fight come out of the Saad Awad victory? Was this something that you immediately wanted to get back into action, or was Bellator asking if you would be available for a relatively quick turnaround here?
Yeah, I mean, I was right in the middle. I was just chilling. I was out in New York doing some surfing, chilling out, and my manager hit me up. He's like, "Yo, what about Paul Daley in January?" And I was like, "Fuck it, let's go."
Is there any worries at all that Paul Daley's had troubles cutting weight his last couple of fights? He's missed weight, I believe, in 4 of his last 8 performances, but also getting ill close to fight time. Is that a concern at all that maybe he's going to have trouble making that 170-pound limit?
No, I'd be all right.
When you look at the year coming up, Brennan, the 170-pound weight division in Bellator, there's a lot of big names popping up, you being one of them as well. Rory McDonald coming to the promotion as well. Is this kind of a year for you where you're looking at just getting as many fights in as possible, a championship run, because you're clearly one of the standouts here in this weight class that is one of the focal points for Bellator this year?
Yeah, man, I've said it a million times before. I'm not concerned with having a belt. If I never fought for a belt again, I wouldn't really care. I just want to fight. I just want to be exciting. I just want to, be known as an exciting fighter, fight big name dudes. Feature. I love fighting feature fights. I fight any weight, 70, 85, and 205. Like I've said that many times. And I'm just down to fight anybody. Yeah, is having a belt nice? Yeah, it's all right having a belt, but then I don't think you get to fight as much when you have a belt. It's I like scrapping. I like having exciting fights. Paul's perfect. You know what I mean? Shit, man, I'm worried about Paul, then we'll figure out what's next.
Now, almost a year ago, we saw you actually make an appearance in Japan for the Ryzen promotion. I know you're worried about Paul Daley first and foremost, but beyond that, is there any interest in going back to Japan, possibly representing Bellator over for that promotion?
Absolutely, man. That was the best. That was the funnest time I ever had traveling, going to a fight. That was awesome. I would love to go back to Japan. So, absolutely.
I talked to you right before the Saad Awad fight, and you had talked about kind of some of the differences because you're one of the guys that was part of Bellator from the get-go with the old regime, the new regime. As you look ahead to 2017, are you looking at this any different than before? Because you seem to say that it's kind of growing to be much bigger than kind of a family operation that you classified it as prior. Has that changed at all for you?
I mean, as long as I fight the way I fight, I'm exciting. They know, the fans know when you tune into one of my fights, you're getting fireworks. I'm never going to lay and pray. You know what I'm saying? I was watching UFC last night. This shit was boring. Dudes laying on top of each other, man. Fuck that. They know. Bellator knows what's up. They know I get down. They know I'm bringing the fireworks every time. You can't get rid of a guy like me. I'm fucking going to be around until I feel like leaving. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you're highly entertaining. You're a fan favorite. As you mentioned, you'll fight at 170. You'll fight at 185. We've seen you at catchweights in the past as well. And you're very interested in using that stand-up. Has there been any interest in possibly trying out Bellator kickboxing? Them having that branch over and that opportunity for some of the guys to convert over. Would you be open to take a kickboxing match if it presented itself?
Yeah, I would. Absolutely, I would. I'll do anything. I was an amateur boxer. I boxed amateur for years. I'll throw some kicks in there too. Fuck it.
Did you watch any of Paul Daley's comments on the Countdown show? And how, do you feel there's a mutual respect between the two of you going into this fight?
Yeah, man, there's a respect, of course, man. Because we're old school dudes. We're not going to sit here and talk shit about each other and hype the fight up by talking shit. I'm going to knock him the fuck out, blah, 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 this and that. That's childish bullshit. You know what I mean? Dudes who fight like we fight don't need to talk shit. Because someone's getting knocked the fuck out. You're not going to talk shit. You're going to talk. I don't need to talk shit in my fights. I've gone to decision one time ever. I knock dudes out. I submit motherfuckers. I know lay and pray. I'm not out there doing the glorified sparring. I don't need to talk shit and hype up a fight. People are going to watch me fight no matter what. Paul don't need to talk shit. People are going to watch him fight no matter what. Because we got it like that. We don't have to be talking shit, hyping shit up. People are like, oh, shit. Ward Daley? Fuck, I'm watching that. Daley versus whoever, I'm watching that. Ward versus whoever, I'm watching that. They know what's up. I don't gotta sell a fucking fight, bro.
Now, in 2015, you were able to fight 4 times. Last year, just getting 2 contests in. Now that you're getting, your debut in 2017, first fight of the year, already pretty early into the year. Ideally, how much would you compete in a 12-month span if it was up to you?
It depends. Depends on the season. It depends, man. I got a lot of other shit I like to do. I love surfing. I like going on a lot of surf trips. You know what I'm saying? My family, we're big into skiing and snowboarding, man. I'm always up in Vermont in the mountains doing shit. I got a lot of shit I like to do, man. So, if I gotta train too much and fight too much, it cuts into my fucking recreation time, man. And, life's about living and having fun. And, yeah, fighting's fun. It pays the bills, bro. But yeah, you gotta live. So when I fight 4 times a year, that's a little much. You know what I'm saying?
Last thing here, Brennan. You classify yourself as the last of a dying breed, and you've outlined that here. Someone that wants to go out, have entertaining fights. And do you feel that Bellator is the promotion that they understand that mentality of yours, and they're going to present you with these fights because it appears, with Saad Awad, Paul Daley now, they know what stylistic fights they want to put on television because of your exciting nature. Is this kind of the perfect scenario for you in your career?
Yeah, they're smart. Yeah, these two are smart. Look who's behind it. They're smart. These are business guys, man. They make moves. Look where Coker has taken this company since he took over. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to say any more about that. Those are business guys. They know what's up.
Well, this is a great card coming up on Saturday night. It's Bellator 170, 9 p.m. Eastern time on Spike. Paul Daley taking on Brennan Ward. Very much looking forward to this, Brennan, and thank you very much for the time today.
Yeah, thank you. Later.
Brennan Ward, entertaining fighter, entertaining interview. That is definitely the case. That is coming up on Saturday night. Main card airing at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Spike. And before we wrap up this edition of the MMA Report, one more interview to go, and that is with the UFC middleweight champion of the world. He is also featured in the new movie XXX, The Return of Xander Cage, which stars Vin Diesel, the third movie in the XXX franchise. And Michael Bisping got this role. If you recall, this was originally slotted for Conor McGregor, who then pulled out of the movie after the loss to Nate Diaz to start preparing and get set for a rematch, and it was Michael Bisping who ended up with the role, which was filmed up here in Toronto. So here he is, the UFC middleweight champion of the world, Michael Bisping, on the MMA Report. All right, we are joined here by UFC middleweight champion and featured in the brand new XXX film, The Return of Xander Cage, which is out in theaters everywhere this Friday. A pleasure to have Michael Bisping with us on the program. Michael, how does it feel to have movie star now attached to your many illustrious titles?
Well, thank you very much. I wouldn't quite say movie star just yet, but I'm working on it. But it does feel good. It's nice to be a part of such an amazing movie. As you mentioned, it comes out in theaters everywhere tomorrow, and people should go check this out. It's an incredible movie. People are going to have a lot of fun.
Now, this film was filmed right here in our neck of the woods here in Toronto, and all mixed martial arts fans know the story about you getting the big phone call to fight Luke Rockhold. Were you done filming by the time you got that call?
I was not, no. I actually had a few more days of filming left, so I took the fight on 2 weeks' notice, and I had to finish up the movie. I think I got the call on the Wednesday, and I had to fly out of Toronto on the Saturday, so I just had a few more days. Yeah, there you go.
Was there a lot you could do in those couple of days? I mean, you've got to have tunnel vision now on this championship fight, but still you have this task at hand, finishing this movie.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was able to train twice a day, even though I was still on set every day. So, you know, as I say, I was running in the mornings. I was working out with a striking coach in Toronto, a guy called Jorge Blanco, and then lifting some weights as well. And then flew home on the Saturday and then went to work with my regular team.
Now, last November, you had stated that you may be up for another movie role right around this time. What is your timetable looking like at the moment, both health-wise, movies that are now an option for you as well, because people are curious when you'll be defending your championship next?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I actually found out just recently I got to have a knee surgery, so nothing major, just a clean-up. I've got a slightly torn meniscus, a couple of things going on in there, so I've got to get that knee surgery taken care of. We scheduled that, and I should be having that within the next couple of weeks. Get that taken care of, and then I'll probably be defending the belt around, I don't know, May, something like that, I would guess. And then acting-wise, yeah, there's a few things in the pipeline. I actually fly up to Toronto on Saturday for a TV show that I'm filming. And, yeah, you know, got a few things in the pipeline, but we'll see. Until you sign a contract, it's all talk.
Was there any serious talks to the Tyron Woodley fight, or was that a lot of the two of you having a lot of fun with everybody?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, Tyron said he wanted to fight, and I was like, look, listen, if you want to fight 100%, all good, I'm totally down for that, but I don't think it would be a good idea for you. But, you know, so I was having a little bit of fun with it, but we were kind of serious. We actually did say to Dana, listen, you know, if Conor can bloody fight all these different belts, and so can we. And he wanted to do it, and if Dana wanted to do it, I'd have done it 100%. But he's fighting Wonderboy. And, yeah, I'm moving on, sadly.
Is 180 pounds, when was the last time Michael Bisping saw that weight, 180 pounds?
Oh, jeez. The last time I saw 180 pounds, probably around 20 years ago when I was a young lad.
So you're the champion. You shouldn't have to adjust weight now. They've got to come to you.
No, well, I said that to him. I said, what's the point in doing 180 pounds? It wants to be 185, so at least there's a belt on the line. So he said, okay, all right, let's do it that way. But I don't think that fight's going to happen.
Were you working at all with BJ Penn leading up to this fight, or was your knee in a state that you weren't in the gym a whole lot preparing with BJ at all?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't in the gym because, as I said, my knee has been painful. And also I've been promoting XXX. As I said, that comes out tomorrow, so I've been promoting that, so I've been flying all over the world. So, no, unfortunately, I wasn't in the gym.
Tell us a bit about the character you play in this movie. His name is Hawk, and this was also, we talk about short notice appearances for you. This was kind of short notice getting this role in this film. How much did you learn about the character and get to prepare for this role as well, Michael?
Yeah, well, I did it the old-fashioned way. I auditioned for it, and you audition for it, then you kind of put it out of your mind. That's just the way it goes in this business, you know. And then my agent gave me the call, and he said, listen, you got the part, but you got to get your ass up to Toronto tomorrow. So I was, oh, wow, okay, all right, cool, that is short notice. Yeah, as you said, my character's called Hawk. He's kind of ex-SAS Special Forces type guy, and he's somebody you wouldn't want to mess with. So check it out. I had a lot of fun playing this character, a lot of crazy stunts, a lot of great fight scenes, so I was able to put my martial arts knowledge to use.
What was the experience like doing such a massive, big-budget film as compared to other projects you've done? I mean, the XXX, that's a pretty big franchise, and just being in that kind of environment, did it open your eyes just to see the production at this kind of a level?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been a part of other movies and TV shows in the past, but nothing of this scale, nothing even remotely close to this scale. So yeah, certainly an eye-opener, being on set every day with such legendary actors. You got Vin Diesel, Samuel L. Jackson, Tony Jaa, Donnie Yen from the martial arts world, and you had, Nina Dobrev, Ruby Rose, and just an amazing cast. So being on there every day, being a part of it, the stunts that we did and the fight scenes, the choreography, the weapons training, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time.
My final question. Chael Sonnen is fighting this weekend in California. When you heard he was going to Bellator, was that a tough one for you? Because I'm sure that's a fight that you would love a do-over with, and with Chael leaving, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. Any fighter wants to get a rematch of anybody that has a victory over them. And I think we all know that, he was... Yeah, hello, come in, you good? Sorry about that, my room service. I think we all know he was juiced out of his mind for that one, and I think the general consensus is that I won that fight anyway, so just the judges got it wrong. But, all good. I wish him the best.
Well, Michael, we're looking forward to it. He plays the role of Hawk in XXX, The Return of Xander Cage. It's out this Friday in theaters everywhere, and we look forward to you returning to the cage, and all the best with your knee surgery, Mike.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you to Michael Bisping for joining us. Once again, XXX, The Return of Xander Cage, out in theaters this Friday. And Saturday night, one more time, we're going to chat about the Bellator 170 card because there's no UFC event this weekend. If you recall, this was supposed to be the head-to-head battle in California where the UFC was going to be running at the Honda Center with what would have been UFC 208, and then that card ended up being scrapped. They're going to return to the Honda Center in the summer, and 208 ended up being the February 11th card in a couple of weeks' time. So Bellator has the night to themselves on free television. As I mentioned, Derek Campos takes on Derek Anderson at lightweight. Georgi Karahanyan taking on Emmanuel Sanchez in featherweight action. Georgi Karahanyan, one of the most exciting featherweights, and Emmanuel Sanchez, this is somebody that has fought now 7 times in Bellator, holds 5 wins already, and has wins over Henry Corrales, Justin Lawrence, and Daniel Pineda. So he's coming off a split decision loss to Daniel Weichel, can get right back into things against Georgi Karahanyan, who... this fight very well could set up a future challenger for featherweight champion Daniel Strauss down the road, potentially. Halifax Gracie, he has not fought since 2010 when he defeated Kazushi Sakuraba at Dream 14. He's going to be fighting at middleweight in this fight against Hisaki Kato, who most well remembered for his knockouts of Joe Schilling, both in mixed martial arts and kickboxing fights. Hisaki Kato, certainly one of those fighters that has knockout power and an interesting style contrast to the grappling heavy Halifax Gracie, and very tough to assess where Halifax Gracie is. I mean, still only 31 years old. He is not by any means old, but it's been a long time since he has had a mixed martial arts fight, as he will on Saturday night. Paul Daley and our guest Brennan Ward meet at welterweight. You know, Brennan Ward, as it was brought up in the interview, he has that wrestling background, but I don't know how willing Brennan Ward is going to be to initiate any takedowns. This could be 2 guys just going out there and throwing, and may the best man win. That's what this fight feels like on paper. That's the fight Paul Daley certainly wants, and I get the sense Brennan Ward does as well. And then the main event, Chael Sonnen against the outgoing Tito Ortiz. This fight will take place at 205 pounds. Sonnen's first fight since November of 2013. So in that time, he is now 39 years old. We're going to see how he holds up. It's a 3-round fight. Tito Ortiz, conversely, I mean, his Bellator run, he had the win over Stephan Bonner, which was kind of a circus, and that build up to the fight, and not all that great of a fight. Then submitted Alexander Shlemenko, who is realistically a middleweight and could even fight smaller than that, and is coming off the loss to Liam McGeary, which was all the way back in September of 2015. So well over a year since we last saw Tito Ortiz fight. This fight, I don't think anyone has any illusions of any new tricks coming out from either guy. I think we know what to expect out of a 41 and a 39-year-old. I think conditioning will be a factor, and the ability of one or the other to utilize their wrestling and work on top. This may not be the most entertaining fight in the world. Perhaps we'll be in for a surprise. I feel that you give the edge in this fight to Chael Sonnen. But Tito Ortiz, he has had some performances. I mean, one thing you cannot discount here, both guys, have trained for this fight. Say what you will about Tito Ortiz, but you have seen just how hard this guy has trained for his fights in Bellator, in particular ahead of the Liam McGeary fight. You always know Tito Ortiz is taking things seriously, as is Chael Sonnen. Sonnen, I feel he's in his own division at this point in Bellator. Wins and losses are almost secondary to just the fun fights you can make with Chael Sonnen. I don't think this guy needs to be near any championship conversations. I don't foresee him winning this fight and then suddenly fighting Phil Davis. But Chael Sonnen can be fighting notable names that are designed to headline Bellator cards, and that's what Chael Sonnen is there. He is there to produce eyeballs, and we will see if they do so on Saturday night. We went over with Dave earlier about whether this can be the most watched Bellator broadcast in history. It would have to top 149 from last February, which was the double bill of Ken Shamrock, Royce Gracie, and Kimbo Slice, Dada 5000. A card that is not viewed all that favorably in hindsight, but does go down as the most watched broadcast in Bellator history and most watched fight, with Kimbo Slice and Dada 5000 peaking at 2.5 million viewers on Spike. So those are the kind of records that they are hoping to achieve this year and this Saturday night. So that is the big card for the weekend. That is going to wrap it up. I want to thank our guests, Michael Bisping, Brennan Ward, and Dave Meltzer. We'll be back next week chatting about the UFC's return to Denver, Colorado, as they are presenting their first Fox card of the year next Saturday night, headlined by Juliana Pena, taking on Valentina Shevchenko. You can follow me at I am John Pollock on Twitter. You can catch me on Fight Network, and also subscribe to the MMA Report with John Pollock on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. So we'll speak with you next week. Thanks for listening.